Non-objective art, on the other hand, does not make any reference whatsoever to nature or reality. Non-objective art relies instead on formal elements, the visual elements, design principles, to carry its message. While many artists experimented with abstraction, seeing how far art could go without severing its ties to the visual world, other artists at the beginning of the 20th century turned their backs on the visual world altogether as a starting point for art. Like abstract art, non-objective art developed from the search for art's essence. The Russian painter Vasily Kandinsky was one of the pioneers of non-objective art, and he drew comparisons between non-objective art and music, in that music does not represent anything outside of itself. It is composed of sounds and pitches arranged over time, and yet it is capable of affecting us deeply. Similarly, paintings are composed of colors and shapes arranged over a flat surface, and so non-objective artists strive to communicate through the very language of art itself, in the elements of shape and form, color and line. Non-objective art contains imagery that is completely generated in the mind of the artist. The term abstract art is often used to mean the same thing as non-objective, but there is an important distinction. Abstracted imagery may or may not be recognizable, but it has been derived from reality by distorting, enlarging, or dissecting objects or figures from nature. Non-objective implies that the work does not depict or claim to depict real figures or objects. Non-objective art is not derived from nature, nor is it intended to make any reference to reality. These are important distinctions. Voodoo by Judy Paff is a non-objective work of art. Although the title conjures up images of invisible mysterious forces, rituals and charms that intervene in human affairs, there is in fact no relation to nature or reality. It is pure abstraction, not representing or imitating any visible object, but it is a composition of color and shapes that overlap and weave in and out over the large canvas. She wasn't inspired by anything in nature or reality, and so therefore her work is non-objective. There is an interrelationship between colors and shapes and nothing else in this work. Expressionistic art refers to art that puts a premium on expressing emotions. Painters and sculptors communicate emotion by including distortion, aggressively stylized forms, violent and evocative color combinations, or a combination of these in a highly personal fashion. An emphasis is placed on heightened emotions and the artist's own inner vision. Expressionistic styles tend to favor asymmetrical compositions and often rely on diagonal axes. As does textured surfaces and thick paint application signal an expressive style, as evidenced in Oskar Kokoschka's The Tempest. Kokoschka's free brushwork creates a lyricism that is highly charged with emotion, as if the brushstrokes themselves were spiritual emanations. In this way, he could create violent visions of human suffering. Kokoschka had a passionate, often stormy affair with Alma Mahler, a Viennese-born socialite who was known in her youth for her beauty. She was much older than Kokoschka. After several years together, Alma rejected him, explaining that she was afraid of being too overcome with passion. He continued to love her, however, his entire life, and one of his greatest works, The Tempest, or sometimes called The Bride of the Wind, is a tribute to her. In The Tempest, there are two figures in repose. The woman nestles against the man. The swirling, whirling brushstrokes and the dark colors express a feeling of being swept away with emotions of suffering that express the artist's pain of an unrequited love. Understanding art is a skill, and like any cultural skill, must be learnt. Two major components to understand art fully are form and content. Form is the way a work of art looks. It includes all visual aspects of the work that can be isolated and described, such as size, shape, color, materials, and composition. Let me repeat. It is the totality of the visual elements, design principles, and composition. And it also includes the materials which the work is made of: marble, granite, canvas, paint, and so forth. Form of an artwork does not include the underlying meaning or symbolism. Meaning is the territory of content. This is important, so I'll repeat it. Form does not include the underlying or symbolic meaning of an artwork. Content, however, does include the meaning or symbolism. Content is what a work of art is about. Content includes everything that is included in form: the visual elements, the principles of design, the material used to create the work, and the subject matter, along with the underlying meaning or symbolism of that subject matter. Background information about subject matter is the domain of iconography. Iconography literally means describing images. It's the symbolism, the study of symbolism. Iconography involves identifying, describing, and interpreting subject matter in art. Iconography is an important activity of scholars who study art, and their work helps us understand meaning that we might not be able to see for ourselves. A symbol is an image or element that stands for or represents some other entity or concept. Symbols are culturally determined and must be taught. For example, in the United States today, an eagle is a symbol of freedom, but people from other cultures would not necessarily know by observation alone to connect an eagle with freedom. Let's examine a work of art by Willie Bester called Samokazi Migrant Miseries. This artwork contains many symbols that reference conditions in which migrant laborers are forced to live in South Africa, and the fact that after years of work they still receive no pension and have no prospects for a secure retirement. The subject of Migrant Miseries is Samokazi. Although what is depicted is applicable to many migrant laborers in South Africa, Samokazi was a retired construction worker. When he applied for a pension from the construction firm for which he had worked for many years, he was told that he was listed as dead and therefore was not eligible for one. After many hardships and hurdles, he secured his pension, but it was not enough to sustain his family, and he therefore collected and sold scrap materials. He was murdered by gangsters 6 months after Bester completed this work of art. The collage depicts Samokazi's life. It consists of both 2- and 3-dimensional objects, both found in the townships around Cape Town. The central motif is Samokazi's bed, which also forms the prison which Samokazi is looking out from behind. A lock and chain connect the bed to a Bible at the bottom right. This Bible refers to 2 things: Samokazi's strong religious convictions — he donated a portion of his small pension to his church every month — and the fact that South Africa claimed to be run on Christian principles. The irony of this reference is emphasized by the Bible's close proximity to the second book to the right of the bed, a replica of Samokazi's passbook. Samokazi was so afraid of prosecution and harassment by police that he continued to carry his passbook even after the pass laws were repealed in the late 1980s. Pass laws in South Africa were designed to segregate the population and were one of the dominant features of the country's apartheid system. The Pass Laws Act from 1952 made it compulsory for all black South Africans over the age of 16 to carry a passbook at all times. The law stipulated where, when, and for how long a person could remain in a township. The document was similar to a passport, containing details on the bearer, such as their fingerprints, photograph, the name of his or her employer, his or her address, how long the bearer had been employed, as well as other identification information. Employers often entered a behavioral evaluation on the conduct of the pass holder. An employer, as identified under the law in South Africa, could be only a white person. The pass also documented permission requested and denied or granted to be in certain regions and the reason for seeking such permission. Under the terms of the law, any governmental employee could strike out such entries, basically cancelling the permission to remain in an area. A passbook without a valid entry then allowed officials to arrest and imprison the bearer of the pass. These passes became the most despised symbols of apartheid, so we can understand Samikazi's reluctance and fear of being without his passbook. To the left of the bed and above the passbook are 2 panels representing Samikazi's wife and 4 children. The inclusion of the roller and ink pad for fingerprinting serves to reinforce the discrimination and abuse entrenched in apartheid. And let me explain what apartheid is. Apartheid is the government-sanctioned segregation of blacks and whites. Throughout the work, Bester makes reference to the 2 worlds Samikazi inhabited, the rural and the urban. The rural from which he came is depicted by the inclusions of buckhorns and sheep bones, among other things. The urban world that he lived in at the end of his life is symbolized by the crowd scenes, the industrial landscape consisting of chimneys and guns and mechanical scraps. The scraps also form handcuffs. Bester associates images of industry with imprisonment, as can be seen by the prison bars of the bed and the handcuffs. This shows clearly how Bester felt Samikazi was a captive of the industrial landscape, because he never had any prospect of a secure retirement of his family. We would not necessarily know this iconographic reference, but once we have learnt it, its symbolic value adds a greater depth to our understanding of this work of art. After examining the visual elements, design principles, style, form, and content, we need to look at techniques and materials used by artists to create art. By doing so, we will build our understanding and appreciation of the art process. In our next lecture, we will look at the most basic of the 2-dimensional art forms, drawing.